if I come touch you, then that means that you gotta get up and like that. Yeah, transfer the power of the room.
That's a change room right there. Hey.
Because we're going to have to be united if we're going to get something done in this world.
We are a Love Not Blood campaign. Also, our campaign is Families United for Justice. What we do is we bring families together impacted who've been killed by the police.
The power of witness is what we're here to talk about today. If you think about what a witness is, right? If you ever came up in an old Southern church, if they said, "Can I get a what?"
Witness.
It meant something. You talked about the test of testimony, the things that you went through, right? And you can't have a testimony without a what?
Test.
And some of y'all done went to an old Southern church. And I'm reminded of a test from the Bible, no matter whether you say amen, amen, or you don't say nothing at all. The very story in the Bible talks about a test. David, who slayed Goliath, we rarely talk about the steps that went along with that, the power in the steps, the power in how he was successful. See, David was a powerful being within himself, right? When you think about while David was even at the battlefield today, we end up in so many situations just like that because sometimes we're placed in positions we weren't even supposed to be, but that does not mean that we can't be victorious.
Yeah.
David went to the battlefield that day not to fight Goliath, but to bring his brothers bread and cheese. See, David was what we would call a youth, right? He wasn't even supposed to be on the front line quite yet. So he was there just to feed his older brothers. Kind of like what we do our youth, right? Just stand back a little bit. And see, David went there and they were telling David, hey, whoever can slay this great giant, like, they promised all these things, right? And all these warriors were afraid, but David was like, hey, give it to me, I can take it. And see, initially David, he picked up a shield, right? But David, the Bible tells us, was small in stature. So he picked up a shield. He put on some armor. Armor didn't quite fit because he was small. He out there with big boys, right?
Yeah.
The shield was a little heavy because he was small in stature, right? He tried to pick up a sword that just didn't work because he was small. So David said, well, I'm going to take all this shit off. And I'm going to go with what I know.
Yeah.
And what he knew was a slingshot. Because before that, David had already slayed lions, tigers, and bears with that slingshot, right? So y'all like, you gonna take a slingshot out there with Goliath? They're like, what kind of shit is this? But David went out there and he slayed that giant with that slingshot because he went with what he knew.
Yeah.
Because he'd already been tested. And see, when I think about the people that's on this panel, the brother beside me, I first met in my living room because he was there on a case that I was working on here in South Louisiana. And that particular case was Ronald Green.
Yes.
And this brother had traveled some way to be there in support of Miss Mona. And I was organizing that case in my previous role as the president of the NAACP. So this brother showed up in the living room on a case that I had been working on at that point 3 years. But see, when we engage in these things are not an overnight thing. You got to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
I've never stepped in somebody's living room and promised I was going to win. I promised them I was going to do my best.
Yeah.
And I never told them something that wasn't true. If families have came back to me and said, even if they didn't like what I said in the moment, they appreciated the fact that I was the only person that told them the truth.
Yeah.
I was the only person that stepped in the living room and said, you're not going to get a murder charge, at best manslaughter. And if we really good, you might get criminal negligence. You were honest about it. I met this brother in that situation. And this Sister Fox and Brother Rob Rich, I met them in the course. I met Sister Fox at the gate of a prison. And she was there fighting for Mama Glow to be released. And I remember meeting this sister first time. I had never seen somebody come to a wall without a carrying coach on. She was out there looking like she was ready for the runway, but ready to go to war. Then I met Brother Rob later on, who told me about his story, his fight in Angola, how he never lost hope. Even though he went to the fields to work those fields, just like you do in Angola, freedom was always on his mind.
Yeah.
And see, in talking to this brother, I got to find out how intelligent he was, because the whole time he was there, he wasn't thinking about his situation. He was there studying how to beat that giant. He was finding the slingshot. See, I don't know Ms. Watts, right? My first time meeting Ms. Watts. Well, Ms. Watts doesn't know, over the years before I became the president of NAACP, when I was just an advocate, when I was just an investigator, one of the people I studied was the great Medgar Evers. What I found was that Medgar Evers would sometimes travel the state of Mississippi dressed as a woman to collect information. He was the most competent civil rights investigator to ever live. But he wasn't a great orator, right? He wasn't Dr. King. He didn't have the flair. So we sometimes forget him. But nobody was able to get more information on civil rights cases in Mississippi or in the South than Medgar Evers. And I found out that he was a catalyst in the Emmett Till case. Medgar Evers chased down people himself. And I ain't gonna say he beat the truth out of them, but he did what he had to do. That sometimes people misunderstand that, but fuck them. I found that Mamie Till did one of the most bravest things in history, right? She decided to have an open casket funeral. And you gotta look at that in its very core essence, right? She wanted America to see the evil of the South and the evil that was happening to black people in this region. The evil that was happening to black children and black males, right? And it turned the civil rights movement on a dime. Because they got to look evil in the face, laying in that casket. They were witnesses. So Mamie turned her trauma into success, turned her trauma into a movement. And see, the brother all the way on the end, Mr. Glenn Foster Sr., first met him and his wife some years ago. And I remember going to Glenn's mother's house, right? And Glenn's mother had a big feast over there, right? She was a real lively person, right? They do second lines and stuff like that. But I remember seeing the pain on this lady's face, right? Because their son had ended up dead in the back of a cruiser in rural Alabama, right? And I automatically think about the Ronald Green case, right? How Ronald Green was beaten to death on the side of a road in North Louisiana. And I think like even in 2018 and 2019, 2014, 2025, black men are still ending up dead on the side of the road in the back of a cop car or at the hands of police officers, even at this day. So it makes you think, has the system even changed or does it just look different? Because the results are still very much the same for black and brown bodies. So I think it's only right that we start with possibly the oldest case at this table, right? Which is the Emmett Till case. And Ms. Watts, because sometimes we look at all of these things and we see the media, we see the speeches and all of that, but we rarely stop to ask, how did moments make the family feel? How did moments shift and change the direction of where the Till family was going? So I want to hear about your family for a second, if you don't mind, Ms. Watts.
And so for 70 years, this is the 70th anniversary, 1955, when Emmett was murdered, lynched, beaten. Where the world, as you mentioned, had an opportunity to bear witness to what hate looked like. But for our family, a person rose to the occasion, and that was my cousin, my shero, Mamie Till Mobley, his mother, who did something unheard of at that time. And she did share Emmett's body. Now, was that something that was welcomed by our family? No, because no one did that.
Yeah.
But I think she was moved by a whole different sense of purpose and a whole different sense of responsibility. Because at that time, there were a lot more of Emmets. before Emmett. There were a lot more even after. But at that moment, I think she rose to the occasion. And it made our family, number one, scared, frightened, but also very proud of her courage.
Yes.
Because none of us could see that. But as a little girl, growing up, I had an opportunity to witness her courage and what she was able to do. But let me just say this, in terms of family, it's difficult. When people rise to the occasion, sometimes people misunderstand your rise, your voice, your presence, and it makes people uncomfortable. And it made some of our family members uncomfortable as well. But over like 47 years, Mamie stood at podiums, in homes of other stolen lives, their families. She prayed, she was in her church, she stood in front of young people, and was able to pour into them something she didn't have a chance to pour into Emmett after the age 14. But she poured enough into Kim that gave her that courage to move forward in life, understanding that other young people at age 14 needed to live, needed to realize their full lives. So as a family, we stood in the shadows in many instances, watching her and praying for her and making sure that she had what she needed to move forward. Her voice was silenced. January 6th, that had to be 2003. And we decided as a family to start the Emmett Till Legacy Foundation 2 years after her voice was silenced. But her mission wasn't silenced, right? It was passed on to many of us. So you'll hear about other family members across the country that are doing a variety of different things. But in her book, The Death of Innocence, of which she did not have a chance to tour with it because she died right before it was finally published, where she had finally an opportunity to tell her story. But as we sit here today, I think she provided a blueprint for other mothers, other family members that are in this bond to share their story, make sure that their voices are heard, make sure that at podiums that we stand alongside of attorneys, that we stand alongside other activists and other families as well. And so as a family, I'll just say our roots, Church of God in Christ, we are all different things right now too, Baptists and other, but that spiritual foundation was very important for our journey back then and our journey going forward.
Watts just really told you an important thing, right? She said, I want the family beside the advocates and the activists, right? Far too many times that we have activists that want to be out in front of everybody. One thing that I've always done is I tell families when I step into their living rooms is that y'all won't be your own spokesperson. So give me the best speaker in here, I'm going to teach them everything they need to know. And you should only use me if they can't make it. And then you should have a backup person to that person, right? Because when you put an advocate or an activist out front, that family takes on that person's politics, right? Takes on that person's mistake, right? Takes on the time that person went to jail. Takes on all of those things. Let the family speak for themselves. They got moms, right? So I'm glad you brought up that point, man. You ain't supposed to get famous doing this work. You ain't supposed to get rich either. It's supposed to be hard to pay your bills. That's how it's supposed to work, right? So next, I want to go to Uncle Bobby, right? And Uncle Bobby, you know, I asked this morning, and I'm gonna ask you the same thing because sometimes we think the struggle is like so much worse down here in the South, right? We often don't think about Fruitvale Station in a way that we think about some of the things that happen in the South, because it happened out there in Cali, right? So Cali sometimes comes off as an easy field, right? What was California like during that period? What was that struggle like coming through this, looking for justice in a place like that?
Well, first, let me just say thank you for all who have come here to witness our stories, to witness what the struggle is like, and to witness the fact that we here have either lost someone that was extremely dear to us or been in pain behind a system. This, what I still say today, and I'm sure many would agree, racist criminal justice system. But what happened in Oakland, sadly, my nephew Oscar Grant was murdered. And to not take it for granted, is there anyone in here who do not know who Oscar Grant is first? If not, it's okay, raise your hand. So there's a few of you. So in 2009, January 1st, in Oakland, California, at the Fruitvale BART station, my nephew Oscar Grant was pulled off the BART train, thrown to the pavement floor, with a knee on his neck. That same knee that was on George Floyd's neck was on Oscar's neck back then. And he also said, "I can't breathe." And the difference was Tony Peroni was intentionally pushing his face through the concrete floor, cracked the bones in his face. And then Johannes Mesley pulls out his gun, shoots Oscar, goes through his body, hit the concrete floor, bounces back up, and hit him in the chest, collapses lung. Of course, he dies. Shot with one bullet, with 2 injuries. Of course, what happened, as you know, in Oakland, the birthplace of the Black Panthers and many activism that have taken place all around this country kind of radiated from that spot. So it's in the DNA of the folks there, and so they embraced us, they loved on us, they stood with us, they cried with us, and ran back and forth to court with us, but most importantly, they shouted out, "I am Oscar Grant." And had it not been for the video cameras that helped ignite that light back into us, what we saw was an injustice. I'm sure none of us would know who Oscar Grant is, but because of that video camera, and that's what this is about, how important witnessing is. These commuters actually videoed what was happening to share with the world. The community shouted out enough to where we had the ILWU, Longshoremen Union, shut down the West Coast ports, stopping billions of dollars coming to the state of California. Of course, the Alameda County Labor Council, as well as the San Francisco Labor Council, and then throughout the state of California, all came together, and we were able to get, for the first time in California state history, an officer arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to jail. And I try not to be long-winded because I definitely want you to hear from the other panelists, and it's just a shame that our time burns up so quick. But in essence of what happened with that respect, the journey just started. But I think most importantly, because I carved out this idea to have this group of panelists and this story told, because I am clear, had it not been for you witnessing what happened to Oscar and sharing with the world, none of us would know what happened to Oscar. He would have been criminalized, dehumanized, and demoralized, and all of us would have just kept on going with our lives. But he paused, and in essence, to Emmett Till paused with his mama opening up the casket. That was the catalyst for the 20th century movement, what we call the Civil Rights Movement. When Oscar was murdered, and because you put out your cameras and you video, he was the movement for the 21st century, considered today as the Black Lives Matter movement. That was the visual that actually opened the door for us today say, let's show up in Minnesota and support George Floyd, the biggest gathering of activists and protesters to an incident in the history. You get what I'm saying? So witnessing is so important. And I did wanted to share, but we won't, we got to deviate because of time, a little video of each panelist and their essence of their work. So I'm just going to suggest to you, if you got the flyer or you go to our website, you can actually scroll and you can witness this for yourself. Because the only way you can really become truly active in this movement is that you got to empathize, but also put on our shoes and really bring the support. And how do you do that? Showing up today, hearing us speak, and then moving out on it. Because you've actually been called, as you know, and that is why you're here, to understand what this real movement is about. And as we can see from the presidency on down, we're under attack. If you went to the preliminary yesterday, you heard it said over and over and over what we have to do. So I'm gonna pin it there. I can go on, but I definitely want you to hear from these panelists because they all, and I'm gonna just jump real quick. I'm sorry. I'll do this really quick. Fox was a witness when you hear her give her testimony to her struggle with getting her husband out of Angola. Glenn Foster, sadly, is hidden, and that's why he had to be a part of this, because his son is an NFL football player, or was, with the New Orleans Saints, and the world still have not truly understood what happened to him because of our failure to witness and bring about the exposure of this heinous act of police violence. So that's what this is all about. I'm gonna stop right there.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on it, right? Because when you look at the pain that's attached to this, man, you know, and sitting there from the perspective of a father that did everything right? And I know that Alabama really ain't even changed that much, right? Man, I appreciate your fighting the fire and your passion to keep going. Thank you. So, you know, before we get to, you know, Fox and Rob, and they're gonna tell you a lot about their story. Can we have till 11:10 with y'all? Can we have till 11:10? All right. Just want to make sure, right? For all intents and purposes, if these people had quit, they wouldn't be sitting here. And I say Fox and Rob because Fox and Rob will remind you we identify as a couple. When you look at, you're facing certain incarceration if you stop. It would have been easy for Rob just to go to those fields and say, I'm just going to work and be a trustee one day, right? Takes a little freedom that way, right? It would have been easy once Fox got lucky and got out of jail to say, hey, you know what, Rob, it's been nice, but I'm going to find me a man. But that ain't what they did. Fox didn't quit till she was free, and she didn't quit till her husband was free. And when you think about how oppressive this system is, these folks were looking at life sentence for a little bit of money. And I ain't never heard one of them say, hey, I was innocent. Y'all just did too much, right? Y'all gave us too much. The crime don't fit what we got. And for far too many times, there's a simple mistake in Louisiana costs people their lives, and especially in this state, young black men their lives. And it always leads me back to the question, has slavery really ended or just evolved? Because the Angola plantation, because that's what it is. And we ain't got time to get in there, but Google it. People still pick cotton in those fields. It ain't changed nothing. And the faces are still black. Might be more black men than today.
As Rob says, in Time, the Oscar-nominated film, now streaming on Amazon Prime Video. Baby, what you say? If love was an acronym.
Right, it would be life's only valid expression. Before we go any further, for those of y'all that are meeting us for the very first time, collectively, we are known as Fox and Rob Rich. We're a formerly incarcerated couple that spent more than 21 years behind bars before receiving clemency in 2018. And probably one of the biggest takeaways that we have from that experience is knowing that to be free is to free others. But prison is not all that is our story. We're also the subjects and the creators of the Oscar-nominated documentary Time and that of Time to Unfinished Business. And it is through the power of film that we've been able to tell our family story. In our efforts, say 1997 is kind of when all of this took off and got started. We were high school sweethearts, had a business idea and started a family. And just when all of those things started to slip away from us, we thought to regain financial solvency by robbing a bank. Respectively, we were sentenced to 60, 45, and 19 years. Me receiving 60 years, my nephew receiving 45 years, and my wife receiving a 19-year sentence, 2 7s and 1 5. That were all run together. All of us were first offenders, and I was particularly given an additional year for a charge that was brought up to me because the district attorney in the sidebar told me that the reason that they had given me the 61 years is so that it would memorialize in my head the last time that someone had committed the act of jury tampering in that parish. It was 1938 when it had happened last, and it was 1999 when I was sentenced. So 61 calendar years later is what he thought to sentence me to as a first offender. And so when you talk about bearing witness and you talk about sharing testimony and those kind of things. Fox and I know those things all too well because ever since the first day that we went into this situation, we have been working to bear witness. Helen Prejean is a death penalty advocate, and also she wrote the foreword to our book. And one of the things in our side talks with her that she mentioned that stands out to me is she said that it is one of the most common of human principles that when you are faced with hardship.
Not to make you break, right? Because you told me that you got 61 years, right? But tell them how much money you actually got away with.
It was $5,000. It was maybe $100. Yeah, right. It was maybe $5,000, 100 and maybe 36 cents or something like that. And Fox has a joke that she says that the 36 cents had to be ours because we weren't totally broke when we working that bad. But when you think about, the fact that someone would sentence you to that much time for that little amount of money, this was not necessarily this was not one of the most heinous type of crimes, that we witnessed. This was a money crime, at the end of the day. The victims in the case, the people who I actually robbed, said that they thought that 10 years at a maximum would be best for me. And they sidestepped that, the district attorney, the judge, and everybody sidestepped that and thought that the sentences that I mentioned earlier were appropriate. But to the point of Helen Prejean is that whenever we are face to face with human suffering, the most common of human principles is to look away. And for many, many years, she talked about how she walked up and down the aisles of death row, bearing witness to men and women that were slated to die. And so much of the same holds true for Fox and I, is that we've always sought to bear witness. I thought that it was really crazy when Fox used to always pull out her cell phone. Those were camcorders back then. This is long before cell phones became a thing. But she was always documenting stuff, and I was wondering, why do you always have that camera in my face? And little did I know that this many years later, that documentary footage, that over 25 years worth of archival footage would not only become something that would make what we now know as the Oscar-nominated documentary, a documentary that Time Magazine held as one of the top 25 defining works of the Black Renaissance, and Hollywood Reporter deemed it as one of the top 50 films of our century. But little did I know in that moment what documenting, what recording, what bearing witness to our situation would bring about. And because she takes on directorial credits on the second film, and I think I got slandered on that, but I ain't gonna say that. But I think that it would do a disservice if I went any further talking about that. So I would give way to the director of that film and the person that actually had the presence of mind to document all of these years in terms of what was happening to our families.
So for me, I would probably start off by saying thank you all so much for being in space with us. This is such a heavy topic, and I can't thank Aunt B and Uncle Bobby enough for extending space to us in such on such a powerful platform. To be able to sit next to you, Ms. Watts, to be able to sit next to you, Senior Foster, we're really humbled by that. For me, bearing witness is probably one of the most, I think, quintessential things that we can do, in particular in this moment in time. We are at a historic crossroad in our society where, it's a constant battle for good versus evil. And your children, your grandchildren will ask you, when all of that was going on, where did you stand? And how do you prove where you stood? You document, you bear witness, you write, you speak, you use your voice. Here I was, a small town girl out of North Louisiana, Shreveport, but I knew that what was happening to my family was asinine. That we don't treat human life like this in America. We're the land of the free. This can't be real. I opened the trailer to the second film with the very words, if it had not happened to us, we never would have believed it. I was a college-educated woman with a master's degree who found myself in one of the most desperate moments in my life. And my family and I, we made a very poor decision. But in that poor decision, it did not mean that we were any less human. And in a humane society, regardless of our transgressions, we treat each other with humanity. And so I am fortunate to be able to say that I actually started documenting our story because I was so happy this boy had finally asked me to marry him. We would have been dating for 10 years, Uncle Bobby, off and on again. You know, he leave, he come back, he leave, he come back. You know, I leave, I come back. We had 3 children between us, and when I tell you, I thought this was mission impossible. So we weren't even dating when he proposed, and it was, you know, kind of, after you got 3 kids and 10 years off and on again, you don't really do the one knee thing. At least he didn't. He just said, I said, what are we doing? He says, well, I would marry you tonight if I could. And I said, tonight? I'm busy tonight. What about tomorrow? And 30 days after we reunited over that 10-year period, 30 days, we eloped down to Florida and got married at a little wedding chapel in Kissimmee, St. Cloud. We were building a family, finally. I knew we could do it. And defied all the naysayers. And the naysayers that are still going on today, when you think about the fact that 70% of black women never make it to the altar when they're 40 or older. That only 32% of black people in America are married. So just with that, we had defied the odds, and I needed to document that. And we were so happy when we got married, everything was going our way, and as soon as we got married, everything fell apart. Everything you could imagine. We talk about it all in our book. You just, the documentaries can only give you half of it, but when you talk about 6 months into our marriage, we are facing 297 years in prison. Our children are socially orphaned. And then I knew that I had to document more. But by the time we were in this system for 10 years, 15 years, Rob says that by the time we were in 10 years, I began documenting simply because I knew that one day I would have to tell this story. That I realized, Eugene, it wasn't just happening to me. This wasn't a one-off. But the more I met these families, the more trips to Angola, I realized that this is a whole system designed to do intentionally. My story wasn't just one of a few, it was one of many, of excessive sentencing, of no humanity. The same disregard that would lead the police to sit on Oscar Grant's neck until he no longer had life was the same system that instead of using weapons, used the instrument of time to lynch me and my entire family. By the time we were in 15 years, Rob says, I think we should do a documentary. Never did a documentary before. I did some TV stuff, but I don't know how to do it either. I don't even care. It don't matter. We got to do it. And so in that moment, I started figuring out how to do it, because when we believe that something must be done, we find a way. And that is what I would encourage you all to understand, is that, we heard a pastor in Houston once, and he said that, they say if you can't run with the big dogs, you better stay on the porch. And he says, well, I will counter that. He says, you ain't got to be no big dog. All you need to be is some strategically placed fleas. So here we were, not knowing how to tell a story, or I just knew that it had to be told. And in that understanding, when we move in that direction, God, and you are a faith believer of any sort, God, the universe will open up and bring to you exactly what it is that you need. And so the universe brought to us the award-winning Garrett Bradley, who had been funded by the New York Times to do another project. And I said, well, listen, I need you to go back to them and ask them, will they tell this story? She does. They greenlight the project. It's supposed to be a 15-minute op-doc on the New York Times website. But when I give Garrett Bradley just half of the footage I had shot over 20 years, she took it to Concordia with the help of Lorene Powell Jobs and the Oscar-winning Davis Guggenheim. That 15-minute op-doc with my archive footage would become the Oscar-nominated film that we see. But that storytelling just wasn't enough for us. Why time two, Fox? This first film was so amazing. Why do you need to say more? Because I knew that what we did once Rob walked out of the gates of Angola was going to be far more impressive than what I had documented in the first 21 years. Because I knew that we had a duty and a responsibility. We had a mission. Now that we were free, we had an obligation to free our nephew and to bring home the other deserving men and women that we knew were just like us, needed another chance, didn't deserve the hand that they had been dealt, and they needed somebody to be a voice for them, a voice for the voiceless. Time to Unfinished Business was released on Juneteenth through a exclusive link, time2movie.com. If you have an opportunity to check the film out, I promise you, whatever work that you are in, it will bless your journey because it shows you what we're really capable of, what we simply believe. Not only do you get this film that you will own for life at time2movie.com, but you also get these assets because I don't want to just show you how I did it. I want to give you the information that you need in order to be able to get the freedom that you're seeking for yourself. And maybe it's not from the criminal justice system. But it is so many of these systems that are sucking the life out of our society, not just one group of people. I know that there is something you're experiencing, something around you that needs a broader, a bigger, louder voice, and we are counting on you to do just that.
Sometimes, let me tell y'all, sometimes to get to real intellect, you gotta ask stupid questions, right? You got to look stupid to people, right? And when we talk about, you know, what it was like in California, I asked that question this morning. I said, what was California like? They were like Baton Rouge doing all stuff. What do you think is different, right? And I had to ask that stupid question to get to the real intellect of it, which is that pain ain't regional specific when it comes to black folks, right? So it ain't no different here than it is there in Oakland, right? It's all pain and it's all trauma. Mr. Foster, you got a boy that played in the NFL, right? He winds up somehow dead back in what police call rural Alabama. Tell us about that experience.
My name is Glenn Foster Sr. I'm the father of Glenn Foster Jr. I have to say that, you know, as a family, we did everything the right way, you know, raise our children's right, put them through private school, work with them, nurtured them, loved them, encouraged them. I'm a college graduate. My wife is a college graduate. Glenn graduated from the University of Illinois. Played college football in the Big Ten for the U of I for 4 seasons. And then he signed as a rookie free agent for the New Orleans Saints. This is when Sean Payton was still the head coach. And to make a long story short, no matter what status you achieve in life, it makes no difference. It makes no difference. It makes no difference. So you do the right things. Yet, when Glenn was found dead in a police cruiser, the only thing you really saw on the internet was a mugshot of my son in a prison or jail uniform. That was the image, that was the narrative, that was the story that law enforcement or the jail system was painting and depicting of my son. You know, they portrayed that negative image, that narrative. And believe it or not, my wife and I, Sabrina, we worked with a representative in Louisiana. I believe his name is Royce Duplessis. Matter of fact, he's running for mayor right now. We actually worked with him and lobbied the Louisiana legislature to pass a law, because basically a person is considered innocent until technically proven guilty. That's the way the law should be, and that's what's in the Constitution. However, when that negative images go out into the public and social media, a prospective juror, let me see who this guy that I'm going to be going on a jury for. Let me see if I can find something out about him. And if you see a mugshot of somebody, you don't think anything positive of that individual. It's all negative. So he actually worked with the state legislature to pass a law to, if somebody's arrested, that mugshot, should not be released. They still should take the picture, of course. Or let's say someone escapes from jail, for example. They should send that mugshot out so we can find that person. Yet someone that's been arrested but not tried and convicted, So Landon, he said, "The hell with that."
Yes, sir.
So he squashed it. So just kicked it out. I guess he signed an executive order like the guy that's in the White House right now. So now you get arrested, your mugshot is going to get out there, and it just paints a negative picture of someone that could be innocent, yet they could be tried in public opinion from just that image being out there. So to say that my family was devastated is, it's like reliving a nightmare over and over again. You just can't believe it, yet it is true. We're originally from Chicago. We came here several years ago to support my son, his wife. My wife and I retired early. I retired at 55. I think she retired at 60. So we've been a part of my son's and my daughter's life, from day one. And that's how we got down here in New Orleans. And I say that it's ironic that my father, Irvin James Foster, God rest in peace, he was born in the state of Alabama. Matter of fact, I think it's called Ralph, Alabama. You guys know where that is. It's near Tuscaloosa. And it's ironic that my father, who left the South to escape Jim Crow, he told me about lynching that he, heard about. He did actually witness that happened down in the South. He left for opportunities in Chicago. And my son, Glenn Jr., winds up losing his life in the same state that my father left for a better life. So it's an ironic twist there, but with the help of different organizations that my wife and I are part of, Love Not Blood campaign. As a matter of fact, my wife and I partnered with Black Lives Matter Grassroots, and we actually formed a family-led or impacted family-led chapter here in the city of New Orleans. So we're not just fighting for our son's legacy, we're also fighting for the legacy of other impacted families whose loved ones' life was stolen. So my wife and I, as I mentioned before, we formed a Black Lives Matter grassroots chapter in the city of New Orleans. We're also with a national campaign to end qualified immunity for police.
Yes.
Because here's the thing. In order to get something different, you have to do something different. If you guys give these rogue cops the opportunity to continue the carnage that they're wreaking havoc in our neighborhoods and communities all over the country, why would I stop as a cop? What's this series called? The Untouchables? They're untouchable with that qualified immunity. Okay? Second thing, all right? Certain municipalities require the police to have their own insurance rather than the city providing them insurance. And think about this. If a cop does bad things, he will lose his or her insurance. They can no longer be a cop. Yet, if the city or the county or the state or the organization that they work for is paying their insurance, they'll just
No responsibility.
Right.
No
No accountability. So these are some of the things that we're working in our community to try to make a difference. We're off the sidelines now. We're in the game.
Done it really quick. Of course, AB 953, a Racial Identification Profiling Act, we was a part of and got passed. To know your rights, or the right to know. SB 1421 gave us the right to go into police folders and understand who they are when it comes to police shootings, falsification, investigative reports, and of course, sexual crimes. We followed that up with, of course, AB 748, the video camera and audio release within 45 days. So when a family is impacted, at least in the state of California, we have that argument to make instead of suffering for 2 or 3 years before they reveal it. And of course, most importantly, not just most importantly, but part of the importance is AB 392, the most strictest use of force legislation in the nation. We changed the necessary standard to the reasonable standard to the necessary standard. Then, of course, one of the last ones, SB2, is the decertification. No more wandering cops in the state of California. They go into a national database. So that means they decertify, they lose their license. They can no longer ever be a police officer in the United States, but specifically in the state of California. So that's part of the work that we've been doing. In closing that, I want to say to the panelists, thank you for being a part of this panel today. And then for Eugene, I wanted to share was that we actually had Kat Brooks, who was going to be our moderator, but she was stuck in Denver. So I called up Eugene and asked, and on the spot, he picked up the matter and said, be here. And said, thank you for and leading this panel. Much love to you for that. And then finally, of course, my wife who opened it up. For those that were here, know how lively she can be. She will be the one that's going to close us out. But from Uncle Bobby and our family and all the panelists, we say thank you, we love you.
That's about being in intentional space with folks that actually want to push the policy, can push the policy, and actually have the ability to get it done. One thing about this work, what it will do is sometimes uninvite you to some rooms, right? if I see an advocate or an activist in every room, I stop working with them. That means you ain't doing that. Because you still got to invite everywhere, you ain't pissed enough people off. So, and one thing Fox brought up, and all these folks have brought up again and again, Fox talked about, hey, just go with what you know, go with what you have, right?
Yeah,
go with what you have. Fox ain't had no big camera, she was recording with that cell phone, right? She went with what she had. She took her tools, and that kind of is just how we opened up with David, right? David went with what he knew. That's right. And for those folks of y'all that ain't religion, the famous philosopher Boosie Badass and Webby, they say that you can't get that Henny, then get some E&J.